Development and organisation of sport. All around the world there's always been a class system. Now, these are normally broken up into lower class, middle class and upper class. Upper class has always tended to be the rich people in society. The middle class or working class has always been the people that are working. They're not as rich as upper class, but they're not quite poor enough to be lower class. And the lower class, they were always on the lowest part of the hierarchy. They were the poorest and tended to have the least pay in their jobs. This slide focuses on the developments of sports and activities in the medieval times. Games were usually localised and played within the villages, but as there were no rules or rule books written, the villages tended to have their own variation on the rules. This meant that one village couldn't play the next because it would end in dispute as the rules would be different. Types of sports or activities that would have been played would have been things such as hunting. This was usually played by the upper class as they did it for fun, whereas the lower class tended to do it for survival and food. Other examples would be archery, mob football, wrestling, animal baiting, skittles and bowls. Development of sports and activities in the Tudor times. Henry VIII was very fond of sports. And as sports developed, the richer people, also known as the upper class, always had better facilities and equipment, meaning they could outplay the lower class. In these times, the types of sports that would have been popular would have been cockfighting, bull baiting, bull running, and you can be assured gambling or wagering would have taken place. Around these times, rugby as we know it today wasn't created. There were games similar, such as mob football. It was a game that had no rules, apart from there was no murder or death. This then slowly developed into rugby. In Hanoverian times, the Industrial Revolution took place. So when people started to leave the rural areas where team sports were played and started to move into more urban areas for better jobs and better housing. As the urban areas grew, this took away the countryside, meaning there was less availability for traditional village and town sports. But a positive was that at this time rules were being made and set to follow by different towns and villages. In the Edwardian times, sports like football and rugby became much more popular in the public schools, but the schools were still mainly dominated by athletics. All schools now have a national curriculum that they must all follow for all children under the age of 16. This is so that the children and teenagers can have a more active lifestyle, staying healthier. In the past, public schools were for boys, or rarely for a few girls of the upper class. They were also seen as quite intimidating places, as they had some leaders of the hierarchy in the schools. These were the boys that were looked up to. They would lead by example and boss people about. When public schools started, they were usually boarding schools, which would have all been separated into different groups called houses. These houses would have leaders. They would tended to be of the upper class. At these schools, the boys would have all been taught by teachers, but after the lessons there would have been no control and no supervision, meaning that they could play any sports they wanted to or get up to any activities that they should have been. This sometimes led in bad behaviour. As sports became more popular in public schools, they were then used to develop important life skills such as team spirit, mutual respect, and leadership. The Clarendon Report of 1864 was a report that set the powers and responsibilities of the governing bodies and headmasters of schools. The Clarendon Report set rules for headmasters and pupils to follow, making promises and guidelines that everyone should follow, not just at one school, but follow at all schools. This helped people participate in sport, as there were now rules set that everyone must follow, and it made things a lot fairer. In the development of sport, there was a stage called the barbarian stage. At this point in life, there were many blood sports such as wrestling and bare knuckle fighting. As these were violent, this led to a lot of injury. Games would have been passed from area of the country to another area of the country, as many boys started to move to different schools. As these games developed, people became more involved and started to enjoy them. They were used for social meetings and control, but the pupils were still being disciplined by the masters. The Arnoldian stage. Thomas Arnold was the headmaster of the School of Rugby. This is where it's believed rugby was invented. He was one of a few famous headmasters that wanted to change the old ways of harsh lack of discipline and wildness of the schoolboys. He saw rugby as an opportunity to do this, as it showed important skills such as leadership, team spirit, and communication. He also saw that there were certain players that were looked up to and acted as role models. Religion affects sports participation in many ways. If it's played on a holy day, such as a Sunday, this may get in the way of training, but also of worship. This means that some members of different religions may not be able to participate or play in the sport. Another reason could be due to the religious views or stereotyping that are in society. Some religions believe that women should not participate in sport and should be learning to get an education or staying at home. Other religions have strict guidelines on what clothing the people of this religion should be wearing, so it may see that a female in a skort playing netball is inappropriate. The ancient Olympic Games. When the Olympic Games were first introduced, they were seen to be played in the honour of the gods that were viewed to be at the top of Mount Olympus. In these days, there was no technology or knowledge on sports, which would obviously mean there was no specialist equipment to buy. When the Olympics were first introduced, you would not have been wearing clothes when taking part, nor would you have been female. The games would have been unsafe, with no crowd protection. No safety precautions were taken into consideration during the games, and those specialist environments were developed. Games such as running would have taken part on dirt tracks, probably with holes in to roll an ankle. Another example would have been the javelin throwing. These were done in crowds. The first ever Olympic Games has been traced back to 776 BC. These events took place in Olympia, but may have started before then. The modern Olympic Games began by Baron Pierre de Coubertin. As the education system was very important to the Baron, he believed that a healthy mind ran alongside a healthy body. And he used this theory to try and develop the younger people's mind. It's helped boost knowledge of the sports in the Olympics, and still today we are adding different sports in. As this was a major sporting event, families would have got involved buying tickets or watching on the TV, and this is still boosting participation levels of sport today. Sport is used around the world to keep people healthy. As said in the last slide, healthy body equals a healthy mind. The government in the UK encouraged this healthy lifestyle, as it will save them money in the long run. Because the chances are, if members of the public are living a healthy lifestyle, there's less chance that they will need medical support. And medical support in the UK equals NHS, paid by the government. Sports are also used to help distress people and keep them calm. Amateurs and professionals in today's world are known as completely different things to what they used to be. Professionals in the modern day are people that are paid to take part in their sport or profession. For many people, celebrity role models tend to be professional. For example, a professional footballer gets paid a lot of money to do something that they enjoy. These people tend to be looked up to. Whereas many years ago, professionals used to be looked down on, as they had to perform the sport for their money. Whereas the upper class did it for fun, as they did not need the extra money. And nowadays, amateurs perform at a low level and a low intensity compared to professionals of today, doing it for fun and intrinsic reward. But many years ago, the amateurs were very much the upper class, performing just for fun, as they did not need any money, as they were the richer and higher class. Here is a sports development pyramid. At the bottom level we have foundation, above that we have participation, second from top is performance, and at the top we have elite. These are all different levels of development. Foundation level, would be someone that tries and is introduced into many different sports. An example of this would be doing tag rugby at a primary school. They would be able to learn the basic skills that can be developed further. For example, being taught how to tackle safely and protect yourself in transition phase of tag rugby to contact rugby. The next level is participation. This is people that are performing at school or club level, for example, being selected for the school rugby team or being part of a local club. You would be performing for fun or for fitness views, or for even social aspects. You may even take part in extracurricular activities with your school or college. You would also be taking part out of choice, not because you're being forced to. The performance level, this would be representing school or club. For example, playing for your local rugby team at a high standards. Your main focus would be on winning or competing at a good level. Just like taking part in large tournaments with the aim to win, not just to turn up and take part. Followed by excellence, this is performing at a high level, for example, playing for a rugby academy, such as Harlequins who play other academies in England and in other countries. This would mean that you have specialist coaching, for example, taking part in a paid or organised training session with qualified coaches of level 3. You would also be educated on sports science and knowledge of dietary needs. Mass participation organisations. Examples of these are DCMS, Sport England, local clubs, NGB, sports coaching, youth sport trust, education and parents. The Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport helps to drive growth in sport and enrich lives. They do this by promoting sports and sporting events. Sport England are a national lottery funded organisation. Their aim is to make England an active nation. They do this by organising events that show how sports can benefit and be fun to anyone and everyone. One of their high aims is to try and narrow the gender participation gap between male and female. National governing body example would be the RFU. They aim to keep rugby safe and fair, but also open to everyone. They go about this by setting rules that everyone must follow to keep the game safe. They also set up events and tournaments worldwide, and they also every season reconsider the laws and alter any that are seen to be needed. The Youth Sport Trust is a charity that uses sports to improve the lives of young people. They have a local scale programme and an international scale programme. They do this by setting up sporting events in areas across the globe. They also do this in areas that don't have access to facilities or equipment.